Let's talk about acting school. Acting is a lot like D&D in a way that some people love and some people hate. It can be improvised and silly, or it can be highly considered and very detailed. And if it's too detailed, it becomes cold and unfeeling in a way that feels almost uncanny valley. Sanford Meisner once said, just kidding. You thought I was going to quote dead guys at you. I'm not a professor. I'm just a guy who fell asleep in a lot of their classes. But what I will do is tell you a few things that I learned that changed the way I think about acting, and how those tips and this deck of cards have shaped the way I DM. Don't worry though, this video is for non-actors. I won't be using any words like proscenium except in the context of a scene description. I may have graduated from theater school, but these days I spend a lot more time behind a DM screen than on a stage, much to the dismay of my professors. But I would be lying if I said there weren't some remnants of my BFA training poking their theater mask-shaped heads out at my players. So, let's get into it. And remember that these are just tools that have helped me. If you have your own methods, feel no obligation to change your ways. But if you found yourself struggling with any of these things, then stick around. And maybe learn a thing or two from a guy who is not an expert in any of the things he's going to talk about. I recently had somebody tell me that the biggest thing that kept them from becoming a DM was having to do voices. In the moment, I was left so speechless by this that I couldn't formulate a good answer. All I could do was offer a verbal thumbs up, a pat on the back, and say, I'm sure you could do it. But the more I think about this, the more it makes me sad. How many stories have we been denied simply because somebody thought they had to do voices? I would argue that voices are like the cherry on top of a 100-layer D&D cake, and some people don't even like cherries. After a second, I was able to ask, why would that stop you? To which the person offered a reply that at first seemed valid. I'm afraid that my characters are going to blend together. I fully understand this concern. But let's deconstruct this a little bit, and then I'll get into the whole reason that I started with the acting school spiel. If your characters are blending together, ask yourself why each character exists. Stay with me, sure. In the real world, we might be purposeless meat sacks hurtling through space, but in D&D, we have the privilege of choosing who inhabits our world. NPCs might feel like they have to exist to fill a void, but the second you write a character to fill space rather than to serve a story, you created a prop rather than a character. Now, I don't mean you have to spend hours developing a story for every character. In fact, I really don't think you should spend more than minutes on most of them. But instead of a character's backstory, I would urge you to think about a character's stakes. What is at stake for this character? Nothing is a completely valid answer, and it probably will be the answer for most of your NPCs. For example, most shopkeepers you meet should have a little more at stake than hope for good business or a fear of being robbed. Now, these characters might blend together. The shopkeepers, the people on the street, and here's the hot take of all hot takes. I think that's fine. You probably don't remember most grocery store employees you interact with, save like one or two facial characteristics or like some cool pants. These are the kinds of details that your players should be remembering about most NPCs that they interact with. Now, what does this have to do with doing voices? I would say it has a lot to do with it. Doing a voice, in my opinion, is often used as a shortcut to the uniqueness that giving a character their own stakes can achieve authentically. Here's what I mean. A shopkeep who sounds like Kermit the Frog offers minimal roleplay opportunities as opposed to a shopkeep who is in a hurry to close for the day. Talking like Bugs Bunny might be an instant injection of personality into a character, but that charm will wear thin very quickly. It does more to establish them as a non-player caricature. But a shopkeep who is angry with one player and overly fond of another might go so far as to change the prices for one player, which then creates a puzzle out of a simple roleplay encounter, which, if you're like me, every social encounter is a puzzle. You know how sometimes when you're walking down the road, you see other people walking around and you're like, man, Every person has their own brain and their own thoughts, and they're going about their day and doing their own things. That's true in D&D too. In fact, in D&D, everybody can have a little issue. So in short, if you're struggling with your characters blending together, give everybody a little problem. It can be something from needing help getting a box off the top shelf to help overthrowing the Empire. And after that, then, and only then, should you consider yourself with making that gnome sound like Shaggy. Now, you might be asking, hey, friendo, what if my players want to know something more about an NPC in the moment who I haven't spent any time developing? Well, then, I present to you this. This is a D20 table of stakes. So, if you need a situation, simply consult the table. If you roll A1, get it? A1, like the steak sauce. If you roll a 1, maybe the character has to poop. And if you roll a 20, maybe they're on their way to deposit a really big check at the bank. But now you're probably wondering, where does acting school come into all of this? Remember how I said that voices were a shortcut? Well, what if I told you that there's another shortcut, one that's much easier and much more accessible to more people? Well, there is. And it's called You might remember somebody's voice if it doesn't match their body, for example, but most of the time the voice is the last thing that you think of when you're describing somebody. What almost always comes to mind are physical characteristics. Now, you can't give yourself the piercing gray-green eyes of Yellathan the elf. And if you can, please teach me how. But you can hunch your shoulders. You can close one eye. You can scrunch your face. Now I'm Popeye. All I'm saying is that there are 100 ways to make a character unique that don't involve improv comedy and don't involve voiceover work. My whole point for this section is that doing voices should not be the thing that stops you from telling your stories in this format. And if it is, stop. Your creativity deserves to be shared with the world, and if not the world, then a table of 3 to 6 other nerds. And now, I'm going to tell you the benefits of walking around like a beetle. In acting school, we're finally getting there, I spent 2 days a week one semester crawling around on the floor like an animal. In a faux ecosystem constructed of blue mats and black boxes, interacting with other students acting like other animals. We're finally getting to the other attribute of my picture of choice here. And this was a class. I paid money to do this. In fact, I sent several emails to my teacher begging her to let me enroll in this rather than do a dance credit. And the point of it, or at least what I gleaned from it, is that complete deconstruction and reconstruction of the physicality can really help unlock a character. Now, I am not asking you to spend an hour meditating and then crawling around on the floor like a snake for a while, like I did. But for major NPCs, it can really make them stand out if you pick a particular animal and kind of have them embody it. For example, a lion-like character might puff out their chest and obsess over their hair or their mane. An eel-like character might be quick to retreat, but still carnivorous in the social sort of sense. Yaharda, the Lich Queen, could be a snake, and Gibblewit, the tinkering gnome, could be a mouse. Or you could flip them around, and Gibblewit could be the snake, cunning and slippery, and the Lich Queen could be the mouse, nibbling away at the foundations of society. Isn't that cool? It's so easy to build characters this way. And I encourage you, don't let the scale of an animal determine how strong you think they are. Don't power scale nature. And honestly, just for fun, I'd say try to challenge the stereotypes presented with every animal. It makes for more interesting characters. Now, to fulfill that little tactile craving that I know all you D&D nerds have. I know, because I have it too. These are the archetype cards by Caroline Myss. Mice? I don't know how you say it. I also don't really know how you're supposed to use them. I believe you use them sort of like to identify traits within yourself, but I use them to identify traits within my D&D characters. Catch a man a fish, and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. Teach Adam to fish, he'll find a way to mechanically incorporate it into D&D. These things are great. Say you're sitting there trying to figure out how to describe the personality of your favorite new brainchild. For this example, we'll use my favorite NPC, Rosewater. Rosewater's personality can be described in so many words. Their smile is as ambiguous as their eyes, their hair curls as subtly as the corners of their mouth. Can you tell I really want one of my players to romance this fella? But this only goes so far as to describe how a character would act in any given situation. So, I go to the deck, I flip through it, and I find a card that has the attributes that I like for the character. So, I pick out 2 or 3, let's say Mother, Angel, and Fool, and now I have a 3-word guideline on how Rosewater acts anywhere, anytime. But what of characters you come up with on the spot? Well, then the deck reveals its second D&D related purpose. Simply draw a random card from the deck, poet, and use the card that you draw to kind of influence how the character acts. Now, a poet archetype does not mean that character is a poet. These cards all have attributes on them, light attributes and dark attributes, and they kind of give a good insight into what the archetype means. But poet essentially just means somebody who uses words to express how they feel, right? Like that's what a poet is. So that's kind of what this archetype means. So maybe you encounter somebody, you draw this card, and this person is very verbose, uses a lot of words. You draw a card from the deck, and a personality just appears in front of you. It's amazing. The princely shopkeep, the whimsically childlike prince. These characters come to life with the draw of a card. And I don't use these as a substitute for the romance novel-esque descriptions that I tend to give to my players. It's just something that I have for myself to kind of guide me in the right direction when I'm playing the hundreds of characters that you do in a D&D campaign. So, in conclusion, you're an actor now. Congratulations, your certificate is in the mail. Bye!